Today I am going to focus on the secret of self-belief. So 4 things we're going to cover today. Talking about self-belief, what is it? What do we mean by it? And then spending quite a bit of time on what shapes our self-belief. Where does it come from and what affects the level of self-belief we have now? I called it the secret of self-belief, and I'm going to come on to why we named it wrong. I'm not going to tell you the answer to that now, but we'll cover that later. And then we'll do a whole series of exercises to help you build a positive self-belief yourself. Before we get into self-belief, I want to begin with a poem. I'm going to read a poem, and I'm going to read the poem at the end too. And I hope you'll see, once we've gone through the workshop, the importance of this poem and self-belief. So just hear me out for a little bit. It's a poem by someone called Marianne Williamson, and I first heard it in a film called Coach Carter, where he is an American football coach and he's talking to his team about what are you afraid of? Why do you believe that we can win or can't win? And the poem goes like this. Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that frightens us most. Your playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We're all meant to shine as children do. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And the link for me, which again we'll come back to, is particularly around Black Lives Matter. That I'm going to be talking about gender and self-belief, but also about self-belief and race, and the importance of how much we hide ourselves, how much the culture we find ourselves in, how much the people we work with can mean that we hide behind the rules in life. And this poem is about saying we all have something to give, we all have something to bring to our worlds. And I want today to help us all find a way of being a light, shining. Moving on from there, I'm going to talk a little bit about why self-belief. I've said a bit about the time at the moment. It is a time about taking ourselves in hand and walking into the world with self-belief and learning how to value ourselves, whoever we are. The other bit about self-belief is we know from Character Scope, it is the most chosen development plan of all the 34 development plans out there. People, in fact, I don't think there's anybody I've spoken to who hasn't said they want a bit more self-belief. It's one of those things that we worry about ourselves. And I want to give you some thoughts about why it maybe doesn't matter. So what do we mean by self-belief? It's the personal confidence that we can make a difference. As you know, if you're high in self-belief, it's about having confidence in your own value and your worth, that you have a place in the world and that you can shine. It involves believing in your talents, your contribution, that you'll make a positive difference wherever you find yourself. And it means not being afraid to take on the challenges that you're facing, regardless of whether you know that you can fully achieve them. Having self-belief is about going into something with a learning mindset, not a mindset of success or failure. It's about a journey. Those people who have high self-belief are prepared to take the journey on. It's also about understanding that, as I said already, the future is in our hands and that we can achieve what we want, not everything, but those things that we choose to give our mind our attention to. And I think deep down what self-belief is really about is it's about the comfort at a very deep level that I'm good enough, that I'm worthy and capable, and that I accept myself for who I am. I When I'm doing the ironing, I like to listen to First Dates Hotel or First Dates. It's my treat for myself. And I was really struck this weekend watching it about a young woman talking about how she spent a lot of time trying to lose weight, fit in with other people. And actually what she'd come to learn over the last few years was that she's absolutely lovely enough, and that the only thing she can take into the world with her is herself. So rather than spending her time trying to be someone else, spending her time beating herself up for not being good enough, or even putting on a coat that is a pretense, that actually what she's learning to do is love herself for who she is. And as a consequence, she had much more self-belief. And as a consequence, what she was finding, of course, is that people found her really attractive, really interesting. And this quote I like: confidence is when you believe in yourself and your abilities. Arrogance is when you think you're better than others and act accordingly. Self-belief is not about arrogance. Self-belief is about liking yourself for who you are more of the time. I don't think it would be reasonable to expect any one of us to have self-belief 100% of the time. The other bit is about accepting that we lose it some of the time. But if you know that you can get it back, if you know it's there when you need it, that's a very good thing. I also found another list of self-belief, and I think it's very relevant to a lot of you here. These are just some thoughts about what self-belief might be. People with high self-belief are more willing to risk the unknown and be prepared to learn on the journey of getting there. There's a really big theme here, isn't there, about trying new things. When you have self-belief, you try and you allow yourself to learn, to get feedback along the way. People with self-belief do what they believe is right, even when they're teased or criticized for it by other people. Having self-belief is about being comfortable with who you are. People with self-belief don't mind making mistakes. You can see in here, there's that, it's not about a pretend confidence. You know when somebody doesn't really have it, when something goes wrong, they crumble completely. When somebody points out something which isn't right, they find that feedback hard. So what we're looking for is being comfortable. None of us are perfect. And actually, imagine if we were perfect, it would be horrendous. People with self-belief accept compliments in a nice way. I think that's quite hard to learn, but I'm sure there are many people who are good at that out there, rather than saying, oh, it only came from Zara, or I got it in H&M, which is a typical response to compliments, as opposed to saying, thank you. People with high self-belief are assured about their own ability to make good decisions, and are, I've said before, willing to admit when they get things wrong. It's a whole other set of things here. People with higher self-belief accept responsibility for their actions and their emotions. It's okay if I feel down one day. It's okay if I'm excited when other people are nervous about things. I think particularly at the moment, I think this is a real harumph week. I don't know if other people have been feeling it, but there's something about this week where we're 3 months into lockdown, and there's a feeling of we're running a really long race and nobody has told us when the end point is. And just this week, it feels really hard, and maybe really hard to keep our belief up that we're going to get through it. And I think having self-belief is about realizing it's okay sometimes to feel flat, to feel down, to feel that it might be hard. And actually at that point, using self-compassion to be nice to ourselves. As I say, I think it's this week and a bit of last week that I've met a lot of people who are feeling it's a long race and we're not sure how we're going to get through, and we'll pick ourselves up, but actually it's been tough at the moment. People with self-belief are willing to be vulnerable, which is putting yourself out there, trying something new, doing something that maybe you don't feel that you're necessarily good at, and also revealing something about yourself and your feelings about things. The funny thing is, so many people, myself included at certain times, of course, we worry about being vulnerable, we worry about other people treating us badly, yet I'm sure all of you know that those people who are willing to be vulnerable, to acknowledge that they doubt themselves, actually we're very kind to, but it's funny that we don't do it for ourselves. There's another group here, and I think this is interesting for all of us, thinking not just about work but outside. When we have self-belief, we don't blame ourselves when things don't work out. It's not our fault. Sometimes the job or the relationship doesn't work out, and it's just one of those things. When we have self-belief, we tend not to be jealous of other people. We tend to be pleased for them. And I've added a bit here. The research said that people who are high in self-belief are willing to leave bad or unhealthy relationships, don't stick around too long. But I think they're also more likely to walk towards the difficulties and try and sort them out first of all, not avoid them, but walk towards them. So that's self-belief. I want to talk a bit about gender and self-belief. There's a lot. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I think there's probably something about race and self-belief, and I hadn't really thought about it until I was speaking now, but there is a lot of research about gender and self-belief. And the interesting thing about gender and self-belief is not just in our database character scope, but it's absolutely true there, but in all the research, women rate themselves as having significantly less self-belief than men. And the other thing we find is that men and women rate women as having less self-belief than they rate men. So it's not just that we women rate our self-belief as lower, it's that we've trained other people to believe in that. And so one possibility is we don't have as much self-belief, and there's been a lot of research around saying maybe it's even genetic, or if it's not genetic from early on, we are taught to be well-behaved. Girls in nursery schools are rewarded for sitting quietly, boys are rewarded for putting their hand up. By the way, this is not to say that those men of you who are here will have perfect self-belief either, but it does seem to be something that particularly is difficult for women to accept their self-belief. So there was some research on genetics or on early learning, and actually the more recent bit, and this is again the bit that fits with race, is that actually there's a paradox for women. We're expected to be sure of ourselves, to have self-belief, and to be modest. And the research says that for women, if you're sure of yourself, you're often called aggressive. And actually, you're less likely to be hired if you're just high in self-belief. And yet, as women, if we're modest, we play ourselves down. We say we're not very good at things, or no, it's just luck that we did things. The problem is we don't get into those positions. We don't get hired. We don't get seen as potential leaders. And so the challenge for women, it's not just at work, but it's in our lives, is how do we manage to develop self-belief at the same time as being understated? And again, as I said, this is the bit with gender. So for a lot of time, women have tried to be everything. They've tried to be sure of themselves, and they've tried to be modest. There's some lovely research saying that women only apply for jobs if they feel they can do 80% of what's in the job advert, whereas men apply for jobs if they can do 20% of what's in the job advert. But the recent research is, what can we do about this bit? And as I said, this is where it fits with race too, is it's not just about changing ourselves. And though the rest of this workshop, we're really going to be talking about things you can do for yourself. If you really, in your organization, want to change the level of self-belief, you've got to do it collectively. It's got to be a bigger movement than an individual one. It's got to be you reinforcing it's okay for women to speak up. It's okay for quiet people to make a noise. And that you need to reward different behaviors, things that you don't see as gendered, you see as available to everybody, and that you actually point out to each other what you've done, which is good, and not just saying, oh, that was really good, that was really nice, but being really specific with each other about what one of your colleagues has done, which is really well. And the more you as an organization can believe in yourselves and collectively reinforce the fantastic things you do, the fantastic hairbrushes that you have. I've been using mine. I still absolutely love my blow styling brush. The more you can do that collectively and talk yourselves up, the more you'll feel good about yourselves. And as I've said, it's not about going out and showing off. It's about having a grounded sense of we're okay and we're going to do a fantastic job. So that's the interesting bit in my mind about gender and self-belief. And as I say, I'm sure that we'll find some very similar things about race and self-belief. Gender and self-belief. So let me go back to what shapes our self-belief, and in a minute I'll get you to do some work. Any thoughts about where our self-belief comes from? Is it made? Is it genetic? Do we create it? Is it a number? So what we found is, of course, that we're not born with self-belief. We don't have beliefs about ourselves the moment we're born. Our beliefs, of course, are formed in our interactions with our caregivers right from birth. We learn how to get our needs met by interacting with other people. And so our self-beliefs come from our relationships. And so the self-beliefs we have been shaped by many, many interactions with individuals in our lives, our parents. What are the things that they told you about yourself? Sit up straight. Children should be, what is it? It was seen and not heard was what my grandparents used to say. What does that mean? Children should be seen and not heard. They should sit there politely and never say anything. Very strange idea. Our beliefs are shaped by our teachers. What do they value? You're not good at that. You're good at that. Well done. All you need to do is be neater. Neat people do well, whatever it might be. Girls can't do that subject. By our brothers, our sisters, our family, our friends, our bosses. Our beliefs are shaped by our experience and the messages we listen to from other people and the messages that we accept. As we said, our beliefs come from the groups of people we spend our time with. Family rules, family beliefs, family friends, family teams. What does your family say is okay? And then also the world that we find ourselves in, both the culture and the society that we live in. What is it that we believe? And actually, again, it's just so present at the moment, isn't it, with Black Lives Matter, that there are so many limiting world beliefs out there. And it is up to all of us to point them out, not just point them out when somebody does a microaggression against us, but also to point out those beliefs that aren't real, the beliefs that aren't 100% true when they happen to someone else. And that's how we can change collective self-belief. So this is about realizing that your self-belief comes from the messages you've received over time from your close relationships with people, particularly those early ones, the groups and family that you've been with, and the world around you. And that our challenge with our self-belief is to get really, really conscious of what those beliefs are and to do something with them, do something about them. So I said I was going to tell you the secret. We named it wrong. We talk about self-belief as if it's a single thing. We talk about I have self-belief or I don't have self-belief. The truth is none of us have one self-belief. We have many beliefs about ourselves. We have self-beliefs. And the more we can be conscious of the beliefs that we have about ourselves and spend our time thinking about, do I really believe that about myself? Where did that belief come from? Is it still true? What's the actual evidence for that? Remember my cousins, I've got 2 girl cousins, sisters, and very early on, their family used to say that Laura was no good at sport and Catherine was no good at cooking. And so for a long time, Laura used to spend her whole time inside cooking and Catherine used to spend her whole time outside doing sport. And now they're grown-ups, and guess what? Laura runs marathons. She's a brilliant runner. And Catherine, guess what? She can cook. But it took them a very long time to accept that the rule that had been set down could be changed and wasn't actually true. And so one of the things that is really important if you want to change your self-belief is, first of all, to listen to what are the beliefs that you reinforce for yourself every day. No, I can't do that. I'm not like that. I'm no good at that. I'm really good at that. Questioning both the positive beliefs you have about yourself, you don't want to lose them, but wonder where they come from, and also the negative beliefs you have about yourself, the critical beliefs you have about themselves. Are they true? Can you do something about it? Changing your beliefs, really important part of self-belief. So what I'd like you to do is to draw these 6 circles on a piece of paper in front of you. Stands for parent, adult, child. Some of you will know this work. It's by a man called Eric Berne. And he talks about each of us having 3 ego states. So this is just a model for thinking about the beliefs that we accept in ourselves and the way we let those beliefs shape what we do in life. So Eric Berne says, in the first 7 years of our life, we're really in a child state. Yeah? We know we're a child because we're emotional. You know, small children, if they're happy, they laugh. If they're excited, they run around in circles. If they're upset, they cry. If they're angry, they scream. If they're tired, they lie down on the floor and go to sleep. Yeah? That for children, their emotions are absolutely at the front. And I don't know if you can see it because I've got the pictures over in the wrong place. Here we go. That Eric Berne talked about 2 sorts of child. And he'd say that inside each one of us, all of you, the 35 of you out there, there's part of you which still is a child. And you'll know that that child is at the front, at the fore, when you become emotional when you didn't really want to, when someone's kind to you and you find yourself welling up and crying, when someone's cross with you and you find yourself welling up and crying, or you want to shout back. That's when our emotions take over. We've been hit by that child. And it's in this early bit of our life that we start developing the beliefs about ourselves. Eric Berne says all of us have a free child inside us. Might be a nice good size, or it might just be a teeny tiny bit of yourself. This is a child, the part of ourselves that can go and have a really good time, let our hair down, be silly, go out and dance on the dance floor, drink a bit too much, not get so completely drunk that we get into danger. That's actually not a free child, that's an adapted child. The free child is the part of ourselves which is free to dance, free to laugh, free to sing, and hopefully we have a bit of that in ourselves. But very quickly, this adapted child comes into play. And in fact, right from the moment you're born, the moment we're born, the greatest disappointment for any child is we're now dependent on our parents. We're dependent on our parents or our caregivers to feed us, to clothe us, to give us somewhere comfortable to lie down, to make sure that we're warm enough, whatever else it might be. And as very small children, right from the moment we're born, we have to adapt our behavior to get that care and attention from our caregivers. So some of us will have learned very early on in our lives, and those of you who do this, you might want to think about yourselves, that the way you learnt to get attention was to be a whiny child. It's not fair. He's got more than me. You're not paying me attention. Sometimes you might get attention by being the really difficult child. There's one of our neighbours at the moment, which is fascinating because they're at home, who obviously has found a way of getting attention by having an absolute temper tantrum. And I think she's actually more than 7, so she's a bit beyond this, but she gets huge amounts of attention by screaming. And the problem is the rest of the road can hear it too. And of course, what happens is her parents come out and give her attention. But we can also learn to have been a very well-behaved child, never put a foot wrong, always do what's right. We can also have been rewarded for being clever as a child. Oh, she's so clever. And what happens, I don't know if you've seen, it's a horrendous program, but they do it every few years. The genius child is normally what they are. And on this program, they have children who score really, really high in IQ tests or take exams early. And you can just watch them with their parents. And what's happened is they've been rewarded for being clever, not rewarded for anything else, just showing off their genius. And it's absolutely comes from this adapted child. And it's at that point in our first 7 years of our life that we're already learning how to be. That's where our self-belief starts to come from the rules we set down as a child. So you might want to write down on your piece of paper, what's your adaptive behavior like? If you think about with bosses, because they're like parents, how do you tend to behave with your bosses? Do you try and please them? Do you argue with them? Do you keep quiet and avoid them? Do you look for reassurance from them? Burst into tears quite often? Whatever it might be. And wonder, is that what you learnt at home? How to get attention when you weren't getting it as a small child? So that's the first 7 years of our life. Then Eric Burns says, between the ages of 7 and 12, something else happens. We start becoming rule-bound. You know, those children, we had a small, lovely 8.5-year-old who came to stay recently, and I was chatting to her while she was cleaning her teeth, and it was going on a very, very, very long time. And I said, Roberta, I think it's you've probably cleaned your teeth enough now. And she said, no, I haven't. It's got to be 2 minutes. So she had a rule, and she was going to keep her toothbrush in her mouth until the 2 minutes was up. And some of you might believe that rule, by the way. Some of you might think it's a truth, and it isn't. It's a made-up figure. 2 minutes, need to clean your teeth for quite a long time. Someone said 2 minutes is about right. But if it's 1 minute 50, 2 minutes 10, 1 minute 10 seconds sometimes, you'll be all right. Your teeth won't fall out. You don't have to do it exactly 2 minutes. That's an example of a rule. And what happens between the ages of 7 and 12 is we eat all the rules. We like rules. We follow rules. We do what teachers say. We don't like breaking rules. And actually, the very sad bit is there's some research that says if you go into a classroom of kids younger than 7 and you say, who's clever? They all put their hands up. If you say, who can run fast? They all put their hands up. If you go into a classroom of 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, and you ask the same questions, only a few put their hands up. I run fast. No, I'm not a fast runner. I can't run. He's the fast runner. I'm clever. No, I'm not very clever. I can't do English. I'm no good at it. And so we accept the rules at that point. And there was a fantastic piece of research by a journalist who, the research he did was he at school was no good at English. That's a rule. He was told he was no good at English. He believed he was no good at English. And one day when he was about 12, he was lying down and doing his English homework, and he wasn't bothering very much because he wasn't good at English. So why should you bother? So he was watching television. He was watching television when he did his English homework. And he started writing his homework as if he was the news reader who he was watching on the television. And he gave in his English homework that night, and it came back and he'd got an A. And the teacher said to him, see, you can do English. And he thought to himself, that's not me. That was the TV person. But anyway, he carried on copying other people, thinking about it, learning, and realized actually that he could do English. And as I say, he went on to be a journalist. But the research he did is he went into some primary schools between 7 and 12, and he asked the teachers to tell him who were the 3 least bright children in the class. And the teachers told him, because they know what the rules are and they probably graded everybody. And he said to those 3 kids, he said, I want you to write an essay as if you're one of the 3 really, really bright kids in the class, maybe Cara, Hannah, Bieber. And so they did. And he said, these are really, really good essays. They're much better than the normal stuff. See, you can do it. And they said, no, I didn't do it. I don't write like that. That's them. And he said, but you can do it. And so eventually those kids realized that they could write a lot better, but they set themselves a rule. And then the frightening bit is he went to the 3 brightest kids in the class and he said, I'd like you to write an essay like the 3 least bright kids in the class. And of course, everyone knows because there are rules in classes and the kids can tell you, even if the teachers try and pretend they're not, who's clever, who's not clever. And the bright kids said, do you know what they said? They said, no, we're not going to write an essay like that, because they didn't want to lose their place. And so that was an example for me, a really powerful one of the beliefs that we set down in ourselves between the ages of 7 and 12 that limit us or help us grow into something else. And the rules we hear in that time and we eat are things like, I should do that, I shouldn't do that, I ought to do that, I oughtn't to do that, I must do that, I mustn't do that, I should wear a coat when I go outside or else I'll catch a death of cold. Is that really true? I ought to eat up my greens. All the rules are what we call globalizations or generalizations. Everybody can do that. It will always go wrong. It will never work out. When you hear people using any of those words, it's not true. It's a rule that they've eaten and they've learnt. It's not true that it will never work out. It might be hard, might work out. It's not true that they should do it. They could do it if they really wanted. So noticing for yourself, when you talk in rules for yourself, I can never do that, I mustn't do that. It's just a rule you've eaten, and question for yourself, is it a useful one? Does it help your self-belief? Does it not? And then what happens from about the age of 12 on is we start questioning the rules. I remember my daughter coming home from school when she was at secondary school saying, Mum, is it really true that if you wear dangly earrings, how many of you have heard this one? If you wear dangly earrings, they'll get pulled out and rip a hole in your ear. I said, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think if you wear dangly earrings, they'll rip a hole in your ear? And she said, I don't know. I said, well, do you know anyone who's ever had a hole in their ear ripped out? And she said, no, but Charlotte knows someone who has. I said, I bet you Charlotte knows someone who's had their earring ripped out, because the chances are what will happen? The earring breaks, it falls out of your ear before. So the question became, so if it's not true, why do teachers tell you not to wear dangly earrings? Because they're dangerous. Why do they say that? They say that because they don't want to spend their time on the floor picking up earrings. They say that because they want everyone to look the same, and some people can't afford them. But really, why do teachers say that? Teachers say that because they like rules. You wouldn't be a teacher if you didn't like rules, because teaching is all about making sure people follow the rules. So notice the rules. And then from the age of 12 on, and this is you now, and this is us, all of us, for the rest of our lives. For the rest of our lives, we can change our self-belief if we pay attention to the rules and the limits we set on ourselves. For the rest of our lives, we can question, is it really true that I'm no good at running? I wonder why I was no good at running when I was at primary school. I wonder why I didn't get into the team. It's true of me. I didn't get to run that race in sixth form. Does that mean I've given up on running? Probably quite a lot. But is it really true? No, I've actually run 4 half marathons, so of course I can run. But I gave up for a very long time because I wasn't very fast at it. What are the rules that you have about yourself? I'd like you on a piece of paper to write down 2 lists. I'd like you about 10 things in each list. I'd like you to write a list of things that begin, I'm the sort of person who. And then I'd like you to write another list with at least 10 things on it saying, I'm not the sort of person who. I'm the sort of person who gets out of bed early. I'm the sort of person who gives up if it's difficult. I'm not the sort of person who complains in restaurants. I'm not the sort of person who gives up, whatever your list might be. Write 10 things in each of them. I'll give you just a minute to do that, and then I'll give you the second part of the exercise. Okay, and then the next bit of the exercise, I'd like you just to spend a minute, again, you can't do it all, but you can go back to it at any time, and you can talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends. When did you form that belief? Where did it come from? When did you see that as part of yourself, whether it's the sort of person I am or the sort of person I'm not? And what things were said about you or to you when you were little that shaped that belief, whoever it might be from? I'm not the sort of person who points out difficulties. Where did I learn that rule? And is there any evidence that you got later in life that the belief is true? And what evidence have you got that the belief is not true? So we're going to move on to changing beliefs. And to do that, we're going to do a 3-part exercise. So you need paper for this as well. I'd like you to write a list of at least 10 sentences that begin with I should. Yeah, so I'll give you 2. I should work harder. I should exercise more. I should eat less. I should get to meetings early. Whatever the shoulds are that you've got, because these are some rules you're carrying around. So jot down on a piece of paper 10 shoulds in your life. So these are 10 things, and there may be more, there may be less, it may be hard for you, that they're rules that you're carrying around. And the problem with rules is they're criticisms. Remember, they come from the parent in us. They come from rules like these come from being told off, being directed by parents. And the bit I know from having kids, and many of you who've either been kids or had kids will know the same, that when we're told off, it doesn't get us feeling better about ourselves. It doesn't lead to great change. Being told off often leads to resistance. And the same is for ourselves. When I tell myself I should work harder, I should exercise more, there's always part of me that goes, go jump in a lake. No, thank you very much. I don't want to. Or I feel pressured to do it. It doesn't come from, this is what I want to do. So what I'd like you to do now is to cross out that word should, and this time look at those 10 sentences, but for each of them, say to yourself, instead of I should, I could, if I really wanted, work harder. I could, if I really wanted, do more exercise. I could, if I really wanted, phone my mum more. I could, if I really wanted, get to meetings earlier. Whatever your 10 rules are. And as, I'll just give you a little bit more, cross off should, I could if I really wanted, and ask yourself as you're saying that, do I really want to? I could if I really wanted work harder. The chances are most of you will say, no, I do not want to work harder. I work hard enough as it is. So then ask yourself, what do you want to do instead? Actually, what I want to do is work really hard on the things that matter and not bother with the things that seem like a waste of time. What I'd like to do is focus on the important things. I could, if I really wanted, do more exercise. Actually, I do want to do, is it more exercise, or I'd like my exercise to be regular? I could, if I really wanted, exercise regularly. It's not more, it's doing it regularly. So spend some time doing that. That if you go back to the first slide I showed, I should work harder, exercise more, get to work on time, whatever it might be. Changing it to I could if I really wanted frees you up, first of all, to make that choice about, well, do you really want to? There's no point. A should is something you feel you ought to do. It's a rule that you've got about things. Once you realize you have a choice, that's when we begin to change our beliefs. And then the second bit is, what do you really want to do instead? As I say, is it work harder? No, I don't want to work harder. Lots of people have this work harder belief, but actually hard work isn't useful. It's doing the right work that really matters, having time to do the things that really get the best out of you, make the biggest difference. And then there's a third phase. So I should, get rid of should, realize that you have a choice, work out what the choices are you want to make. And you should by now have a smaller list, because you'll have realized some of those shoulds actually you don't want to do. Yeah? So maybe you've only got 5 or 6 on your list now, maybe you've got 7 or 8. So the third bit is, if you want to change a belief, you've got to bring it into the present. So instead of I could, if I really wanted, work harder, has already become I could, if I really wanted, do what really matters. And this third step, it becomes I do what really matters. If you tell yourself that every day, instead of I should work harder, you'll be more successful. Or I could, if I really wanted, exercise more. I don't want to exercise more, I want to get fit. I could, if I really want to get fit, becomes I am fit. So this third bit of the exercise for you each now is just to take a moment to turn the ones that you want to do something about into the present. And imagine tomorrow morning you had on your mirror in your bathroom and you looked at it in the morning. I do what really matters, I am fit, and maybe 3 others. How much more likely to walk into the day feeling good about yourself and focusing on the things that will help you have great self-belief. So do that third bit now. Turn them into present tense. I am fit. I do what really matters. I give my mum time. So self-belief is about liking yourself for who you are and learning to be yourself in more and more situations. Self-belief is made up from all sorts of, I guess it's actually when our self-belief isn't high enough, it's made up from all sorts of rules that we have about ourselves that we've learned from the individuals who've influenced us, from the groups that we've been part of, from the culture that we're part of. And if we want to change our self-belief, we have to notice what those rules are and then begin to challenge those rules and come up with positive statements instead. I want to do 2 more exercises with you. One is around noticing how you use your body when you have positive self-belief, when you know you can do things, when you're prepared to give them a try, and comparing that to the times when you lose your self-belief, that you get thrown off, where you lose your confidence in your ability to do things. And be very clear, we all do some of the time. And the reason for getting you to notice the difference between the two is then you can pick up quickly what's happened and then you can begin to do something about it. So what we're going to move on to now is what I call a self-belief visualization. And I hope you find this useful and that you give it a go. And I can't see any of you, so I need to trust you and you need to trust yourself in this. So what I'd like you to do is to get comfortable in the place that you're sitting and to close your eyes. And to notice the sounds around you. You might be able to hear the bird song outside my window. There's a very noisy blackbird who's just decided to sing for us. But notice the sounds around you too. Maybe the tick of a clock. Maybe a car driving past outside. And notice your feet on the ground in your shoes. I wonder how many of you are wearing shoes or even socks. And notice your back against the chair. And now what I'd like you to do is allow to come into your mind an image, a memory of a time recently or longer ago where you lost your self-belief. You didn't feel comfortable in yourself. You didn't feel confident in the situation that you found yourself in. It could be a meeting at work, it could be a meeting with a client, it could be a meeting with friends, it could be interacting with the public, wherever it might be. But a time recently or longer ago where you lost your self-belief, you didn't feel that you were your right self. And allow that image to come into your mind. And notice, first of all, where you see that image. Is it right in front of your face or further away? The reason for that is we store memories in different ways. And notice, is that memory, that image of you when you didn't have the self-belief you wanted, is that image big or is it small? Is that image black and white or is it colour? Does that image have a border around it or does it just fade off at the edges? These are all ways that we store our memories. So this is an image of you when you didn't have the self-belief you wanted to handle the situation or the meeting that you were in. And I want you to notice, do you see yourself in that image or are you looking at the other people? I think most of you will see yourself in the image, but if you don't, just imagine floating back out of yourself so that you can see yourself too. At that time when you didn't have the self-belief you wanted, you didn't feel you handled it as well as you wanted. And I'd like you just to notice yourself in that situation. in that meeting. And notice how you're holding your body. Notice your shoulders. Notice whether they're tight or loose, whether they're up or down. Notice your hands, your arms. Are they moving or are they still? Are they close into you or are they further out? Notice the rest of your body. Notice where you're tight, whether you're tense, and where you're loose. Notice in particular, when you don't have the self-belief you wanted, notice your throat. Notice how you're swallowing. Notice your jaw. Is it tight or is it loose? Notice the features on your face. Notice where there's any tension. Notice your mouth. Notice your eyes. Notice the gap between your eyes. Notice your forehead. Notice the back of your neck. Is it tight or is it loose? At the time that you don't feel that you're able to have the self-belief that you wanted. And notice your breathing. Is it fast or slow, high or low? And notice the thoughts going through your mind as you're in this situation where you don't have the self-belief you want. Notice the thoughts. And notice where in your body you have the feeling that you don't have the self-belief you want. And when you've got a really clear picture of yourself without the self-belief you want, I just want you to let that image go slightly fuzzy, like the old TV test cards or whatever they were called used to do, where it goes out of focus. We're going to come back to that in a while, but we're going to change now. And I want you to allow an image to come into your mind of where you had all the self-belief you wanted. It may be a meeting with friends, it may have been at work, it may have been long ago or recently. It's a time when you had the self-belief to do something that really mattered to you, and that meeting, that instant went really, really well. And allow that image to come into your mind. It can be a small thing, a big thing, many people, just one. Just you when you knew that you had the self-belief to do what you needed to do. And again, notice where you see that image of yourself, having all the self-belief that you need to do what it is that you want to do. Notice, is that image bigger or smaller than the other one? Notice, is it further away, closer up, higher down? Where do you see that image of yourself absolutely having the self-belief to do what it is that you need to do? And again, notice whether in that image of yourself having the self-belief that you need to do exactly what it is that you want to do. Notice if you see yourself or you're just seeing the other people. And those of you who aren't seeing yourself, just imagine floating back up and out so that you're looking in and you can see yourself in that image, that time when you have all the self-belief you need to do the things that you need to do. And notice your body. Notice how you hold yourself. Notice your shoulders. Notice your arms and how much they move, how much they're still. Notice the whole of your body. Notice where you're tense and where you're relaxed. Notice how you're sitting or standing. Notice your throat. Notice if it's open or tight. Notice your jaw. Is it loose? Is it relaxed? Or is it tight? Notice as you're feeling completely able to bring all the self-belief you need to get the things that you want. Notice the set of your face. Notice where there's any tension. Particularly notice your jaw, your mouth, your eyes, the gap between your eyes, your forehead. And notice your neck. Is it long? Is it short? Is it relaxed? Is it tense? And notice the thoughts going through your mind as you know you've got absolutely the self-belief you need to do whatever it is that you want to do. Notice the thoughts going through your mind. And notice where in your body you have that feeling that I'm doing what really matters. I'm being myself. I believe in myself. I trust in myself. I can do this. Notice where in your body you have that feeling. So now you have a really clear image of yourself, having all the self-belief you need to manage any situation. So I'd like you now to allow both those images to come into your mind. The image of you when you didn't have the self-belief, you didn't believe you could do it, and the image of you when you did have that self-belief. And I'd like you to imagine squashing the image of yourself with all that self-belief you need, all the ability to get the outcome that you want in a way which is true to yourself. Imagine squashing that image on top of the other image so that it takes on all the characteristics of you having all the self-belief you need. And notice how that first image changes as you take to it all the self-belief you need to manage the situation you find yourself in. Notice how your body changes. Notice how the colors change. Notice how where your eyes are looking shifts. Now quickly run through that first situation, but this time with all the self-belief that you need to manage the situation in the way that you want to get the outcome which is right for you, right for the other people. And it allows you to feel, I'm really good enough. Run through that situation quickly, taking on all those positive characteristics. When you've done that, I want you now to imagine your life as a line going from the past to the future. And notice what color that line is. For some of you, it might be orange, it might be black, it might be blue, whatever color. And notice your past. Is it to the side? Is it behind you? Notice the future. Is it to the other side? Is it in front of you? Again, we don't store things in the same way, but imagine standing on your life, your line on the here and now, with all those abilities of self-belief, knowing exactly what you're like when you get whatever it is that you need. And I'd like you to imagine moving 1 week, 2 weeks into the future, a month in the future, where you've got a meeting coming up where it's an important meeting, could be in work, outside work, where you want to take your best self, yourself full of self-belief into that meeting. And imagine 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks from now, going into that meeting with friends, colleagues, clients, whoever it might be, you being your most positive, full of self-belief, grounded, open self. And imagine quickly running through that meeting in the future, you being absolutely there with all the self-belief you need to run that meeting well. So that you create a positive memory of how the future is going to be. I'd like you to go even further out. Go out 1 year from now. Go out 1 year from now and stand on your line and look back over the last year, knowing that any time you need self-belief, you know exactly how to stand, how to hold yourself, how to breathe. You know exactly the thoughts going through your head. You know where in your body that feeling of self-belief is. Look back over the last year knowing that you've been able to take your self-belief into all the meetings and interactions over the last year to create the life that you want. Not to take over the world, but allow you to be your best self in all those situations. And notice how that last year has been, you with the self-belief that you need in any situation. Now I want you to go even further out. I want you to go right to the end of your life. Some 50, 60, 70 years from now. I want you to imagine yourself at the end of your life, surrounded by all the people who you've had a relationship with in your life, all those people who you've touched, all those people you've been with, who you've bumped into, who you've known. Knowing, as you look back over your life over the last 50, 60, 70 years, you've been able to take your self-belief into all the situations you want. You've been able to be your best self with the thoughts that you need, the feelings that you need. And notice as you look around you, all those people whose lives you've touched, all those people who are important to you. It may be a smaller number of really good relationships for some of you. It may be a larger number of more people you've interacted with. The number doesn't matter, but notice the quality of those relationships, because you've been able to be your best self all through that time. And notice how your life over the last 40, 50, 60, 70 years has been, because you've been able to be your best self, the self with full self-belief. Enjoy that feeling. I'd like you to imagine floating back right onto the here and now on your line, knowing that you know what self-belief's about, you know you at your best. Just ask yourself if you're prepared to jot a few notes down about what you like when you have that self-belief, and put it into practice over the next few weeks. And just notice if there's any part of you that is saying, oh, I'm not sure. Just ask for the next couple of weeks whether it's prepared just to be quiet for a while, to let you practice taking your self-belief into all the situations you find yourself in. And when you've taken all the learning you need, I just want you to open your eyes and jot down in your notebooks all the things that you've noticed about yourself when you're full of self-belief, when you're capable of creating the world that you want, the relationships you want, the meetings you want, the interactions you want. Just jot down some thoughts about your body, your breath, your thoughts, your feelings, your movement. And again, if just somebody, when you've done that, would just write a note so I know. Have you had enough time? Someone let me know. Yep, great. So, self-belief, it's about liking yourself, knowing who you are. It's not a coat that we put on, it comes from deep down inside us. Our self-belief is about understanding the rules that we've set for ourselves and working out which rules are useful and which ones need to change because they're not based on truth or experience. And then understanding that actually we do our best self if we bring it into the present, and that we also understand how we hold ourselves when we're full of self-belief and how we interact with other people. Self-belief, finally, before I summarize, is also about our strengths. Self-belief comes from really knowing what you're good at, and every one of us is good at some things. Every one of us has other things which we're less good at. So I'd like you to, I'll go through the whole exercise and then get you to do this. I'd like you to write a list of your top 10 strengths, and I've just given some examples here. They don't have to be these words, they could be anything. I said top 10 strengths might be your grip, your honesty, your humor, your kindness, your intelligence, your ability to organize, your perspective, your insight, your humility, your curiosity. Whatever they are, write down what you think your top 10 strengths are. And you're not comparing your strengths to anybody else's. I'm not saying who's the tallest in the room. I'm saying, what are you good at? What are your top 10 strengths? And then I'd like you, that's the first bit of the exercise, I'll just take you through the whole thing. Given the time, rather than, I'd like you to think about how you use strengths in different parts of your life and how you could use them more. And rather than on each of these, I want you to choose one. So we're thinking about either using your strengths in work or in relationships or to learn new things. You can choose whichever one of those is a place that you want to build your self-belief. And so then I'd like you to choose two of the strengths that you use often. And I'd like you just to jot down for yourself, how do they help me? So you might be thinking, actually, I'm thinking about my humor and my kindness, and I want to think about them at work, and I use them a lot, and how do they help me? So you can write a note down. And then think about which other two strengths you could use more often at work. Yeah, and it might be perspective or being organized. And then describe at least two new ways you could use those strengths to build them more. But you might also be thinking about relationships or learning new things. List your top 10 strengths, choose one of those, jot down which ones you use most and how they help you, and then choose two others that actually you want to turn the dial up, you want to use a bit more, and think about two ways that you could use them more to help you either at work or in your relationship or to learn new things, depending on which is most important to you. So what have we been talking about? We've been talking about self-belief, and self-belief is not the same as acting out self-confidence. Self-belief is from inside yourself. It's about being true to who you are and having the courage to be yourself. It's also the best way of changing it is to create a community of self-belief. And that's as true for race, for gender, for your culture as it is for anything else. The more you can point out for each other the microaggressions you see when we have limiting self-beliefs about each other, challenge them, question them, and also build each other's self-belief by being really specific about things that another person has done that you like. Not the, oh, that was lovely, but I really liked it when. It is about self-beliefs. It's not about having a self-belief. We have beliefs about ourselves, and the challenge and the opportunity for us in our life is to notice what those beliefs are and ask ourselves, in that belief, is there a rule that is not helpful? Or is there a rule that is helpful? And do I want to change that belief? Because it comes from a long time ago and actually I can do something different. So notice the rules, question the rules, and build new beliefs about yourself. And then the final thing is work from your strengths. We all have strengths. The more we can work from our strengths and build on them, the greater the contribution we will make. And so I'd like to finish going back to the poem, thinking about self-belief. Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Your playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened, excuse me, my phone just rang. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We're all meant to shine as children do. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We're all meant to shine as children do. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. As we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. So I do hope that you all feel that you have very valuable things to bring.